Opening day was a lie. We'll talk about it on Fantasy Baseball Today Express. Welcome into FBT Express on Thursday, April 3rd. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers. And before we get into everything that's changed since opening day, I do want to quickly talk about Ivan Herrera, who made history for the Cardinals. 3 for 4 with a triple dong, 3 home runs, 6 RBI, and he is the first Cardinals catcher in their history to hit 3 home runs in a game, and he is 53% rostered. Chris, that number feels like it should be higher.
Yeah, I think you can make a case that Ivan Herrera, any 2-catcher league, absolute must roster, must start player. I would imagine the only leagues where he's not rostered are not 2-catcher leagues. And, you look at the catcher rankings and the bottom third of the top 12 is pretty iffy, right? Like Gabriel Moreno's fine, and Keibert Ruiz will be in that range, and Tyler Stevenson when he's healthy. These are all fine players, but none of them are difference makers. And Ivan Herrera has the skills to be a difference maker. The trajectory of his career kind of reminds me of William Contreras, where he put up really good minor league numbers, but was never considered like a top prospect. He got a partial season to show what he could do at the major league level and really impressed. And obviously Contreras has become the best catcher in fantasy. I don't think Ivan Herrera is going to do that, but I think there's a lot of upside here. He hits the ball hard. He's got a good approach at the plate. And he absolutely could be a must-start catcher in any format. That's the kind of upside we're talking about. It's just he's got to get a few more plate appearances, right? He's getting lifted a few too many times late in games for defense. He's sat 2 of the first 6 games. If he gets to 500-plus plate appearances, I think Ivan Herrera is going to be a must-start catcher.
All right, we are 1 week into the season, Chris, and already things are changing drastically. So on opening day, Zack Gallen let us down. The control was bad. We're thinking, all right, here we go again. Another bad season. He was nearly unhittable against the Yankees. 6 2/3 shutout innings with 13 strikeouts, a career high. He had 24 whiffs on 101 pitches, and this is somebody I know that you liked a lot coming into the season.
Yeah, and it's more, we talked a lot this spring about like Lawrence Butler and how like I didn't dislike Lawrence Butler. Everyone else just liked him a lot more than me. And with Zack Gallen, it's not like I was like pounding the table that Zack Gallen was going to be an ace. It's just that everybody else seemed to think that like Zack Gallen might be done. And I didn't think so. So I ended up with him in a decent amount of teams, and there was a lot of confirmation bias going in the opposite direction after week 1. I want to make sure I'm not doing confirmation bias based on this start, but he looked awesome. It's as good as we've ever seen him. 13 swinging strikes on the curveball. Fastball velocity is still down a little bit, but he compensated by not throwing as many fastballs. If he can command the changeup and throw the curveball like he did today, I think Zack Gallen's going to be really good. And either way, I think the worst case scenario predictions about Zack Gallen probably not going to come to fruition after this.
Mackenzie Gore, another one who after opening day, he was amazing. There was no doubt about that. But here we go in his second start, not nearly as good. So at the Blue Jays, 5 innings, 9 hits, 3 runs, 5 strikeouts in this one. He did allow 9 hard hits in this game, didn't use his slider as much. Chris, what did you see in Mackenzie Gore's second start?
Could have been worse, actually. He had 2 different batted balls that had an expected batting average over 670 that were outs. So that's not something you're going to see very often. I don't know. It's what was so exciting about Mackenzie Gore's first start is he's always been much better against righties, which has been really weird for a guy who's a lefty who throws 96, 97 miles per hour. But he had that new slider. It's a little slower, has a little more 2-plane break, and you could see that being a weapon to neutralize lefties. And if he can be good against lefties and sustain what he's done against righties, you can see him starting to take off. Well, I think there was only 1 lefty in the lineup in this one, maybe 2. He barely faced any. I think 11 of his pitches were against lefties, and he struggled. So now it's like, well, I don't know how to make sense of this, except that Mackenzie Gore's career has been defined by inconsistency. And what we can say is that he hasn't grown past that yet. Maybe he will moving forward. Maybe this is just a bump in the road and the next start will look more like the first one, but it doesn't look like we can say for sure that Mackenzie Gore's past what has held him back in the past.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be back right after this.
We Need to Talk is live from the Final Four. Get ready for a championship preview on CBS and streaming live on Paramount+.
Welcome back in FBT Express. Jeffrey Springs is next up. He had an awesome start his first time out. Not on opening day, but opening weekend, his first go around with the Athletics, and then took a big step back here against the Cubs. 3 innings, 5 hits, 5 runs, 4 of those earned, more walks than strikeouts in this start. It looks like his fastball was just not very good in this outing. Chris, if you picked up Jeffrey Springs, I think you're holding on to him, obviously, but this was a big step back after his first start.
Yeah, absolutely. There was maybe a little bit of bad luck. Like, he didn't get hit super hard like Mackenzie Gore did, but I think 2 caveats first. One, the Cubs might just be awesome. We talked about that in the full episode of the podcast. This might just be one of those lineups where everything comes together and they're one of the best lineups in baseball. And 2, Sacramento might be a really tough place to pitch, which we thought might be the case coming into the season. So that's something to keep an eye on with the A's pitchers. They got destroyed by the Cubs, which could be a combination of both. But I think part of it's also just Springs wasn't locating well in this one. You look at the pitch charts and he was kind of all over the place. And when his changeup isn't at its absolute best, he's going to be pretty bad because he's kind of a one-pitch pitcher and everything works off the changeup. The changeup's the primary pitch for him, and he just gets by with his fastball and sweeper. So I think better days are ahead, but there will be some rough patches for Jeffrey Springs as well.
Let's take a look at 2 other pitchers who went in opposite directions here. Pablo Lopez, bad opening day start, much better against the White Sox, 7 innings, 1 run, 5 strikeouts. And then Sean Burke, who was very good on opening day. Big step back against the Twins, 4 1/3, 6 earned runs, 0 walks, 1 strikeout. He was one of the most added pitchers in the past week, 54% rostered. I would be okay dropping him for like a Jordan Hicks or Casey Mize, who we spoke about in recent days.
Absolutely. If Sean Burke, he's 54% rostered. I know Jack Leiter's like 68. If there are any leagues where Jack Leiter's available, would much rather have him than Sean Burke. I still think there's some upside with Sean Burke. Like, he put up some pretty interesting strikeout numbers in the minors, especially, but that hasn't been the case so far this season. 1 strikeout in this one, only 4 in his first 2 starts. So until we see that, I think Sean Burke's pretty easy to ignore unless there's a really enticing matchup. He's not going to get to face the White Sox, unfortunately. And then you have Pablo Lopez, who I think is just pretty good. And he's not an ace. He's also never as bad as the worst starts for Pablo Lopez or even the worst stretches, because I know there's been some frustration around him over the past couple of years. He's a solid top 20 starting pitcher, and I think that's what he'll be moving forward.
All right. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to our full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today Express, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.